It worked pretty good the last time. I think I'll try it again. I didn't bring props today, though. I didn't know if I could get a bag of seed corn, a fodder shot, and a basket of corn up here or not. So I had Shelby put it up on the screen. He did an excellent job. Thank you, Shelby Roy, for doing that for me. Appreciate it. I got to thinking the other day, I thought, why is it that I feel more comfortable standing here than up there? And I figured out what it is. It's a Virgil. I'm right here, got him right here beside me. If I mess up, Virgil, you bail me out. He can do it. I appreciate him very much. Let's see here, Chip. This morning we're going to be talking about the parable of the growing seed. If you want to turn in your Bibles there and follow along, it's every bit going to be pretty much right there this morning. We're going to look at these 4 verses. This morning, as I go through these 4 verses, some of this is going to sound kind of repetitive, like I'm going the same thing again and again, but it just, there's 3 main points at the end you'll see that I want to bring out this morning. When we leave here this morning, if we don't take nothing else away from it, there's 3 things to remember when we leave here this morning. You know, I got to thinking about a lot of people here either is a farmer, has been a farmer, knows a farmer, know something about farming. And one thing we know, if we don't have farmers, we can't eat. That's for sure. But in the Bible, there's a lot of examples where farming is used. And I was trying to look at it, and I Googled it, and I was looking around, and I never could get one. There's like all kinds of different answers. I guess they look at it different ways, but there's a lot of verses, a lot of parables, a lot of different things refer back to farming. As we come this morning, it's that time of year. That's one reason I chose this, because of this time of year. We passed a lot of fields where the combines have done been in there and harvested. And then there's some fields that they're finishing up. And it's just that time of year. I want to first look at kind of like some examples of the farmer and sowing seed. First of all, we have to sow the seed before we can ever have a harvest. But even before that, we start getting ready, we prepare the ground. We have to get it ready before we can sow the seed. And then once it's planted, it comes up, we have to work. We have to keep it free of weeds that hinder the growth. We know if you let weeds take over something, you won't get a good harvest. But when it all comes down to it in the end, the Lord is responsible for the harvest. We're incapable of causing that seed to germinate. We can't produce the rain that's needed to make the moisture to make it germinate. We can't make the sun shine on the field to make it grow after the rains. And we can do all that we can, but we depend on the Lord for a good harvest. Our work as Christians are guided by these same principles. We're called to share the faith, but the Lord went and caused the seed to germinate and take root in their hearts. He alone is responsible for the harvest. As believers, this can be frustrating at times. We'd like to share our faith, but we want to see immediate results, don't we? I'm guilty of that. And while this can happen sometimes, it does more than likely, it's someone else who's probably planted the seed, and maybe we're just being used to water. Remember, the Lord is responsible for the harvest. While we have our limitations regarding the harvest, we must remain patient and sow the seed. So I want to take just a few moments this morning to consider some lessons or thoughts in this parable. First of all, we'll look at the activity in the harvest in verses 26 and 27. In the open verses, we discover that Jesus' description of the activities involved in the growing process leading up to the harvest. We have the sowing. And he said, the kingdom of God is as if a man should cast seed into the ground. Again, Jesus reminded the hearers of the necessity for seed to be sown if there was to be any hope of a harvest. In order for the farmer to reap a harvest, he must be committed to sowing good seed. One could never expect to reap a harvest without first sowing the seed. Some things are out of our control, but this principle will never change if we expect to reap a harvest. We must be willing to sow good seed. I have an example of that. Years ago, we was planting corn, and we was about done. We liked about 3 or 4 acres, and we run out of seed. So it was getting, everybody done bought seed. You couldn't hardly find none. So I went to our local feed mill there, and they said, yeah, we've got some here, but it was some off-brand we'd never heard of before. And I said, well, it's better than nothing. Well, we sowed that seed. Germination rate wasn't good. It didn't get hardly a stand. It growed about half as big as the rest of it. It wasn't good seed. It's the same principle. If we expect a spiritual harvest, we must be willing to sow the gospel, and we got to sow good seed, right? We got to sow the truth. Then we have the waiting. There in verse 27. And should sleep by night and rise by day, and the seed should sprout and grow. He himself does not know how. Jesus revealed that following the planting of the seed comes a period of waiting. The farmer's done his part. He's prepared the soil, sowed the seed, and now all he can do is wait for the Lord to provide the harvest. There'll be some work along the way. Keep the weeds away and the insects and disease. But only time will reveal the abundance of the harvest. And this often is the hardest part of sowing and harvest, and that is patience. Many of us lack patience. We want immediate results. However, a harvest just don't happen overnight. We have seasons, and have you ever thought about this? Some of us could live, say, farm all of our lives, and you may not have but maybe 40 or 50 harvests in a lifetime. That's something that it just don't happen. Now, it's a seasonal thing. We must do our part faithfully, sowing the seed, and wait patiently for the Lord to provide the increase. Next, we have the hoping. Verse 27. While the farmer waits for the plants to mature and yield, we depend on the Lord and hope for a good harvest. We patiently wait with hopeful anticipation for the harvest, but we can't harvest too quickly, because if we do, what happens? Well, we harvest grain or something too quick. The moisture's in it, it's not dry enough. What happens? It's going to rot. Won't be any good. For those who sow the gospel, we must be careful not to pick green fruit. We can't harvest before it's ripe. As much as we'd like to see souls being saved, we must put our hope and trust in God for the harvest. He will know the right time. Now we're going to look at the mystery in the harvest. First, we'll look at the germination. While the farmer was faithful to sow the seed, he could not control whether the seed would germinate and produce a plant or not. The farmer did not create anything. He really can't explain how it happened. He did his part, and the Lord did the rest. I was thinking about, when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about a kernel of sweet corn seed. Swiveled up. Who could ever think you put that thing in the ground and it's going to sprout and make a plant? The principles related to sowing and harvest are quite miraculous. We take our seed, plant it in the ground, and with the right temperature and moisture, the seed will produce a plant. Sometimes seeds can lay dormant for an extended period of time, and then it eventually germinates and a plant is produced. The same is true regarding the gospel. We might plant the seed, but it may lay dormant for a long time. The example I thought of here, and I know many of you have seen the same thing. You see a field in grass or whatever, and it heads out, and nobody cuts it. Eventually, what's it do? It dies down, it falls over, the seeds fall out on the ground. That seed will lay there maybe all winter long. That next spring you go out, start growing, there's all this new grass coming up everywhere. Well, and I've seen corn do the same thing, where it laid there all year and come up the next year. Could it not be true that you might lay a track down somewhere, might lay it in the doctor's office or at a restaurant or something? That thing may lay there for months, but one day somebody just happens to pick it up, read it, strikes up some interest, and they start studying, and the next thing you know, maybe they obey the gospel. Then they're preaching. Shelby's told the story, I can't tell it, but of the one that laid track laid somewhere for years. The man ended up, I think, Shelby, he started preaching, sons preaching. Thousands of people were ended up converted over a track. So I think of that when I think of that. Next, let's look at the growth. This is in verse 28. The mystery and miracle of sowing and the harvest continues. The seed germinates, it produced a plant. The plant will be small and tender at first, but eventually it will grow and mature. In time, these will mature for the harvest. And remember, all we did was plant the seed. God gave the increase. Then we got the gain. Still here in verse 28. Once again, the tiny seed's planted. We patiently await for it to produce. But even in a good season, we don't enjoy 100% yield. Some of the fruit will never reach maturity. You plant 100 seeds, there's not going to be 100 come up. A lot of times you have germination rate, it might say 90% on the bag or something. That means 9 out of the 10 will maybe come up. We can all do all that we can to nurture young or new believers. But the reality is, some will never mature. The maturity in the harvest. In verse 29. I was going to read it. But when the grain ripens, immediately he puts in the sickle because the harvest has come. Here Jesus describes the field becoming mature and the harvest being reaped. Once again, we've got to have patience. Jesus revealed that the harvest is never reaped until the fruit is brought forth. It would do no good to pick the harvest early. The fruit would not be mature and the yield would not be what it should be. The farmer must wait until the harvest is ready before he decides to reap. Patience is necessary when seeking to reap a harvest. The wisdom involved. The time of patient anticipation eventually comes to a close. The fruit is mature and ready to harvest. A wise farmer knows he only has a certain amount of time to reap the harvest. Too much delay will result in the fruit becoming too ripe or drying out. Both situations would ruin the harvest. While we need patience to wait upon the Lord until the harvest is ready, we also need wisdom to reap the harvest when the time is right. If you are faithful to sow the seed, you will encounter mature fruit. And there will be occasions when the time is right for harvest. I thought about, Jonathan went and worked for a couple grain farmers. It's been 10, 12 years ago now, I guess. He told me a story about the guy down in Auburn, Kentucky. They raised, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 acres. And when it got time to start harvesting their corn and beans, he was probably back in the 70s back then. I think he's still doing it. He would get in that combine, and John said he never come out. They'd run day and night. He'd finally get all the trucks filled up and everything. And while he's waiting on something to come back, he'd put more in, he'd take a nap right there in that combine. He was taking advantage of the time when the time was right. As I said earlier, there's 3 main things I want us to take away this morning. Sow the seed, sow the seed, sow the seed. That's our main goal. We have to sow the seed. And then we have to be patient. I struggle with this a lot. I think, why not? Why not? Why is people not accepting the word? We're putting it out there. But in truth, we hear stories, I think, A lot of people are. I think when we hear the stories from the world Christian broadcasting that's reaching, we hear all these. I get these emails from Brother Baker from time to time, and he tells these stories where maybe a few hundred people has responded or something. And then we hear the work of the mission where Brian goes over and he tells about the baptisms and the different things that's going on. And we've seen it right here, haven't we? We've seen it right here. I think we're getting it out there. We just have to be patient. And most importantly, God will give the increase. That is the main thing. We be patient and give God his chance. 1 Corinthians 3:6-9. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. For we are God's fellow, you are God's field, and you are God's building. And I thought of another verse after that, and I'll read it right. Galatians 6:9. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. We will not lose heart. If you're here this morning, perhaps you've fallen away, you need the prayers of the saints, we can help you do that. We make things right before you leave here this morning. Perhaps you've never been baptized, we can do that this morning also. We can help you in any way that you come forward or let it be known if we stand and sing. Come to Jesus, he will save you. Sins is